All right, our speaker today is somebody who is one of us and is eager to share this message with us, as I'm eager to hear it, and is actually going to be hosting us later, and I'll more about that after a while. But it's Amanda Sherlock. So Amanda, go ahead.
Thanks, Brian. And thanks for your tutelage on this. I appreciate it. So, sorry, let me just rearrange this stuff here. Okay. All right. So the title that I picked was Perseverance, Our Common Experience. And the reason I picked that is because especially having been in the magnificent class that Chris hosted with Maria Shriver videos, is that we've all persevered. I mean, we just have. Some of us have persevered longer than others. The gray hair and the wrinkles indicate a proof of the perseverance that we've all had. So what I hope that you'll get from this today is an appreciation for your life, appreciation that everything that you've been through, everything that you've persevered with, and perhaps have a different view of how things were and seeing things in possibly a different way. So this is going to be an active time. So buck up and sit up and pay attention, because I'm going to be asking you to do some things. So the first thing I want to do is to have you take a look at a time in your life that was difficult, where perseverance was necessary. It could have been a stepping stone in your life. It could have been a pivot point, but there was something that you were doing that really required perseverance. So I invite you to think about that. So what happened? What decisions did you make about the situation, about your life, about others, about your relationship with God? What were those decisions that you made? And were there any gifts that resulted from it?
Absolutely.
And can you see that now, looking back from this vantage point, that it might have been for your highest good?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, there's that saying, when one door closes, another one opens, but it's hell in the hallway. Well, my experience is that the hallway is where our growth is. The hallway is that juice that allows us to grow. It's the fertilizer, if you will. So I want to share one of my hallway experiences that was tremendously important in my own growth and where I am today. I've been in sales for 30 years, and salespeople are vulnerable for getting fired if they don't meet quota. I was in a job that was clearly a bad fit. I didn't particularly enjoy it, but ultimately I ended up getting fired. And at the time I lived in Mountain View, I had a Silicon Valley sized mortgage. So losing my income was challenging and scary. And I wasn't at a point where I could retire. So I decided, as it happened, that I was going to use it as my spiritual journey, that it was going to be a magnificent unfolding of something that I didn't know how it would end, or even when it would end. At the time, my mother was 95, and so it was really a nice opportunity for me to be able to go and spend time with her in England. But some amazing gifts happened through my intention of that growth. First thing that happened was I decided to rent out my house furnished short term, because I never knew when I was going to come back. And so I put it on Craigslist and started to get people interested in renting it. in the meantime, I was at a trade show in San Francisco and ran into someone that I had been in grad school with who just started a company, and they were looking for someone to do sales for them. But it was commission only. And if you know anything about sales, commission only isn't really where you want to be, because you have no idea what's going to happen, especially with an unproven product. I was a little nervous, but I said, let's keep talking, because I knew I had to rent my house out until I had some money. Within 2 weeks of my let's keep talking conversation, a friend of mine said, we're going to be in New Zealand for 6 months. How would you like to come and house sit? So it was one of those God gifts where everything fell into place for me. I was, because the job was virtual, I could be in England. So I flew to England. I worked in England. I worked in Palo Alto. I was, various places. Ultimately, that job turned into something that was unworkable. They wanted me to work 60 hours a week, and I'm not doing that for commission only. Thank you very much. So I started to build a list, build an ideal scene of what I was looking for in my career. And I had a list of 31 items that were things like company has integrity, good financial situation, my manager is going to be stable and a good leader, my colleagues are going to be supportive, all those sorts of things. And in that hallway time, in that trusting time, I looked at that list multiple times a day and visualized that I was going to get that job. In the end, I was unemployed for 18 months. And as it happened, it was the last 18 months of my mother's life. I got a job, and 3 weeks later, my mother decided to make her transition. And I get it. She wanted to make sure I was safe and settled. But what happened with that job was I ended up getting 29 of those 31 items from my list. And it was an amazing company. I absolutely loved it. And I decided that that's where I was going to spend the rest of my career. So that was, for me, that was a spiritual experience. But let's go a little deeper to spiritual perseverance. So as the fourth unity principle says, meditation is important. And from my point of view, meditation has been one of the most important tools in my spiritual toolkit. Brian did that class recently on meditation. Some of you have taken my meditation tips class. But the thing about meditation is, at the outset, it seems really difficult because nobody really knows how to naturally meditate. It just seems to be something that eludes us, which is why it's important to get some instruction and have some colleagues and some collaboration in that. So, there are so many things that you can do, so many ways that you can find to meditate. We just saw that lovely thing that Chris shared, which was ocean meditation. You can Google it. You can have your eyes open when you meditate. You can walk when you meditate. There are so many ways to meditate. But what I want to emphasize is that meditation is worth persevering for, because the gifts that come from meditation are so enormous, and we could have a whole conversation about that. One of the other things that I have learned about being a long-time meditator is that it kind of gets, I hate to say it, boring. So if I had the same breakfast every day for 20 years, and I finally got tired of it. It was oatmeal with fruit in it, actually. But so now I kind of go like, but I still eat it. But nonetheless, it's nice to mix things up. So what I have started doing recently with my meditation is to just simply use the word listen. And when I use that word listen, it really quiets my mind. And it also uses the sense of my ears, even though I'm listening with my heart. But I found that word listen has brought some amazing answers. One thing I'd like to do now, just to give you a little practice in moving into your heart is something that I started doing recently, which is moving from my head down into my heart. And how I do that is, we'll do it in a minute, just shift. So just think of where, and you can close your eyes if you wish. Think of your head and think of everything that's going on in it, the to-do lists, the wishes, everything that you might have. Take that and then just imagine a tube going from your head all the way down through your neck into your chest and into your heart. Now take a couple of deep breaths and see how that feels to be in your heart. How simple that was to just be there and leave our heads behind. So when you're ready to come back into the room, you can open your eyes and we'll continue. I did some Googling to find some ideas about meditation, and I really like this one, and I'll read it twice. Spiritual meditation makes you realize the eternal truth and let go of all that had happened and will happen. The present is where you want to be and find solace. The need to practice spiritual meditation comes from an innate longing to see and think beyond the chaotic world surrounding you. And I'll read it again. Spiritual meditation makes you realize the eternal truth and let go of all that's happened and will happen. The present is where you want to be and find solace. The need to practice spiritual meditation comes from an innate longing to see and think beyond the chaotic world surrounding you. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention times when it doesn't work to persevere, also known as forcing solutions. I tend to be someone who presses play and goes. But having spent some time in your heart, let's take a look and see if there is something or a belief that you may have or a relationship that you may have that may not be for your highest good to persevere with. So I just want to invite you to think for a minute, even if it's just a belief, and you don't have to change anything, but just explore for a moment to see if there is something that you do not want to persevere on any longer. Give up to God. So I'll just pause for a moment for you to think about those things. My give up moment was that wonderful job that I decided to spend the rest of my career in. I'd been there for 6 years. I'd been through numerous managers and numerous different iterations of the company, but it was still wonderful and for the most part, great. Then we had a new executive come in and I was working on a project by myself. And she asked me to do something that I was outside my belief, my alignment for my belief. And I realized I could no longer stay there, even though I had made that decision. It wasn't really a difficult choice because I knew that my integrity outweighed my perseverance. But that was my decision. And I was very sad to leave it, but I knew that I had to do that. So going back to the go world, press play and go, I wanted to share 3 people who have been inspiring to me in terms of their perseverance. One is Jack Canfield, who wrote The Chicken Soup for the Soul. You may or may not know that he took that book, that first book, to 130 publishers. And they told him, nobody wants to read stories that are inspiring by different people. And he kept on going. And finally, the 131st publisher published it. They've now got 275 different titles under that logo. They've been translated into 43 languages, 100 countries, and there are 500 million copies of that book in print because he persevered. I mean, I have goosebumps just even telling you that. The other one, the old guy, Edison, he said he found 1,000 ways to not build a light bulb, thanks to Edison. And then the other one who I find to be a true inspiration is Gandhi. He led a movement, a non-violent movement for 30 years against the British to get the British out of India. And that's perseverance, especially when I'm sure others were telling him not. And then the final perseverance is my own story. Many of you know that I do grief recovery in the prison, and it's something that's very dear to my heart. It actually took me 10 years to get in. And every time I went to the prison, I'd kind of say, hey, I want to do grief recovery here. And finally, one day I was in a workshop, and this guy who was my champion said, there's the warden over there. And I said, could you introduce me? He introduced me. And within a few weeks, I had a meeting with him. And then as soon as I could get onto the schedule, I was in there. And I'm going back in August to do grief recovery with 60 guys. So that for me is my most satisfying piece of external perseverance. So I want to close with a quote from Goethe. This is something that inspired me as I began my journey away from being shy, shut down, lonely, and depressed, and having some courage to actually live my life. You probably know it, but I love it. And it scared me when I first read it. It totally scared me. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Begin it now. Or as we would say in perseverance, continue it now. Thank you very much.